The lights dimmed. Millions watched. It was a special broadcast, tension in the air. CNN's America Decides 2028 had pulled in its biggest panel yet. Veterans, teachers, senators. And sitting at the far left, the surprise guest, Robert De Niro. The crowd stirred. De Niro rarely did this live. Vice President JD Vance sat across from him, calm and collected in his gray suit, fingers loosely interlocked on the table. The camera panned to him, then back to De Niro. And then, it happened. De Niro leaned in. His voice cracked but carried. JD Vance is the worst vice president this country's ever seen. Gasps. Audible. The room froze. Some clapped, but most fell silent. JD Vance didn't blink. He didn't even shift in his chair. The moderator's voice trembled, trying to move on, but JD raised his hand. And what he said next would change everything. This wasn't politics. This was personal. JD Vance looked at Robert De Niro with eyes that didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice, didn't slam the table. He just waited, letting the silence stretch like a taut string. The audience squirmed in their seats. America held its breath. Then finally, with a calm that felt colder than ice, JD leaned forward. "Mr. De Niro," he began softly, "you've spent a lifetime acting like other men. Maybe that's why you can't recognize a real one." Someone gasped. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. The air cracked with tension. De Niro blinked fast, like he hadn't expected the punch to come so quietly, so deep. JD didn't stop. "You've yelled at presidents, cursed on national TV, and made your career insulting people you've never met. That's performance. But I didn't come here to perform. I came to serve." The studio fell still. Even the moderator stopped moving. And in that stillness, a shift began. Subtle, but real. People watching at home weren't just seeing a clapback. They were witnessing a man refuse to fold under pressure. Not because he rehearsed, but because he meant it. By the time JD Vance finished his short but blistering reply, Robert De Niro's face had turned pale. The actor, known for towering roles and louder opinions, suddenly seemed smaller. JD looked straight ahead, hands folded, heart steady. He could have attacked. He could have humiliated De Niro. But he chose something stronger. He chose truth. "Your legacy is a script," JD said quietly. "Mine is a battlefield." There was no applause, no jeering, just silence. And then, tears. Not from JD, but from a mother in the front row, a Gold Star mother, her son's photo on a pin across her chest. She whispered something. "He reminds me of my boy." The broadcast went viral within minutes. Clips exploded across X, YouTube, and TikTok. But not of De Niro's insult. It was JD's stillness, his words, his refusal to attack. By morning, the headlines didn't say De Niro destroys Vance. They read, "Vance silences Hollywood with one sentence." In living rooms across America, people weren't talking about politics. They were talking about a moment that felt like honor. And the story had only just begun. After the silence faded, the moderator, shaken, tried to regain control. "Let's bring this back to policy." But a voice from the second row interrupted. "No, let him speak." The camera turned. A teacher from Youngstown, Ohio. Tears in her eyes. She'd lost her husband to an opioid overdose in 2022. She looked at JD like she already knew him. "Mr. Vance," she said softly, "you've lived through it, haven't you? The pain, the addiction, the loss. Can you tell them? Tell them who you really are?" JD Vance turned toward her. No anger, no bitterness. Just a long, quiet breath. "I was 12 when I found my mom passed out in the bathroom," he began. The room dropped into stillness. He shared about growing up in Middletown, about food stamps, about screaming nights, broken glass, and the time he slept on a friend's porch because his mother was in jail. "You see acting on a screen," JD said, glancing at De Niro. "But millions of Americans live scenes every day that don't have a script." Tears streamed down the teacher's cheeks. This was no longer a panel. It was a mirror for America's soul. JD paused, eyes steady, as a whisper of rain hit the studio roof. The audience didn't move. Even De Niro leaned forward now, no longer angry, just stunned. JD continued. I didn't want to be vice president. Not at first. I wanted peace. He spoke about joining the Marines, about watching a friend bleed out in the back of a Humvee in Iraq, about the letter he wrote to his sister the night before an ambush, thinking it would be his last. I didn't serve to get applause. I served because I was tired of people being forgotten. He glanced at the camera. Forgotten like my neighbors, like my mother, like my grandfather who worked 30 years at Armco Steel with arthritis so bad he couldn't hold a coffee cup. A woman in the back began sobbing. That's why I do this, JD said. That's why I stay quiet when insulted. Because I know pain deeper than politics. He turned slightly toward De Niro again. Not cruel, not smug, just honest. And I don't blame you. You've played hard men, but I've buried real ones. The room had no words, just hearts splitting open. As the conversation shifted, JD shared one more story. It was Thanksgiving 2016, he said. I had just published Hillbilly Elegy. People were calling me brilliant, but all I wanted was a call from my mom. His voice faltered, just slightly. The audience leaned in. She didn't call. She was using again. I was vice president-elect years later when I finally held her hand, in a rehab clinic in Hamilton, Ohio. He described her trembling, ashamed, unable to look him in the eye. I didn't see failure, JD said. I saw the war we don't talk about, the war inside. The moderator's eyes glistened. Even a staff camera operator wiped her face. That's the America I fight for, JD whispered. Not the headlines, not the polls, the people who don't get invited to tables like this one. He looked around the room, locking eyes with audience members, then with the camera. So you can insult me. You can call me the worst vice president ever. But before you judge my leadership, try surviving the childhood I did. There was no applause, just the soft sound of someone quietly weeping, and a truth that echoed louder than any speech ever could. A college student from Appalachia raised his hand. CNN almost skipped him. JD saw and nodded. Let him speak. The young man stood, shaking. His voice cracked. I'm from Jackson County. I read your book. My dad was a miner. He died from black lung when I was 14. I wasn't supposed to make it either. Silence fell again. You made me believe I could, he said. That's why I'm in school. And that's why I came all the way here. His hands trembled. His voice grew stronger. They laugh at us in the cities. They call us backwards. But you showed me I'm not broken. I'm just surviving. JD looked down. He swallowed hard. He walked off the stage and hugged the boy. No speeches, no camera pose, just a quiet moment between two fighters, one young, one seasoned, who had both clawed their way from nowhere. De Niro looked away. The audience didn't clap. Many just cried. This wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about the invisible people finally being seen. For the first time in the broadcast, Robert De Niro was quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he suddenly understood he wasn't the loudest voice in the room. JD Vance sat again, calm, composed. Then the moderator surprised everyone. Mr. Vance, if you could speak to the 14-year-old version of yourself, sleeping on that porch in Middletown, what would you say? JD smiled faintly. The memory was still raw. I'd say, you're going to lose people you love. You'll think it's your fault. It's not. You'll hate yourself for being poor. Don't. You'll carry shame in your bones. One day, you'll turn it into something beautiful. The room filled with soft sniffles, a sound more powerful than clapping. JD leaned into the mic. And I'd say this, the pain doesn't break you. The silence after the pain, that's what makes you. De Niro folded his hands. His face had changed, not defeated, just undone. Like he realized this wasn't a stage. And JD wasn't acting. This was real, raw, undeniable. And America was watching. The town hall was nearly over. Producers signaled to wrap it up. But JD Vance leaned forward once more, his voice steady. I'm not here to play hero. I'm not a saint. I've messed up, gotten angry, lost people I loved. He looked directly into the lens. But I never ran. I stayed, I fought, and I chose not to hate the people who hated me. He turned to De Niro one final time. Mr. De Niro, I know you're angry. I don't blame you. Anger can feel righteous, but sometimes it's a disguise for grief. Gasps. Not of shock, of understanding. JD's voice softened. I'm sorry if this country hurt you. I'm sorry if life didn't turn out how you hoped. But don't aim that pain at the people who are still trying to fix what they didn't break. De Niro's eyes welled up. He said nothing. JD Vance reached for his glass of water, his hand just slightly trembling. It wasn't weakness. It was proof that every word he spoke cost something. And that's why America listened. Because it wasn't a performance, it was the truth, and it came with scars. Just as the moderator was about to close the segment, someone from the crew whispered something in her ear. She turned to JD Vance. Mr. Vice President, I understand there's something you brought with you tonight? A letter? JD nodded slowly and reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded, aged piece of paper. His fingers hesitated. Then he opened it. I wrote this the night after my grandfather died. I was 17. I never showed anyone. But tonight, I think someone needs to hear it. The air went heavy. JD's voice shook. Dear Papa, you told me to keep going. You said I'd carry our name farther than you ever could. I didn't believe you. Not when Mom was in jail. Not when I failed my first college test. Not even when I got my law degree. But tonight I stood toe-to-toe with a legend, and I didn't flinch. Not because I'm brave, but because you taught me how to stand. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I miss you. I'm trying to be the man you saw when nobody else did. He folded the letter. The audience wept. Even Robert De Niro's eyes glassed over. The silence lingered like a held breath. JD looked up again. That letter? I carry it with me, everywhere. He held it to his chest. Because I carry them with me. The people who never made it out. The kids I grew up with who are now in prison. Or worse. A journalist on the panel interrupted softly. So why do you keep doing this? Politics is brutal. JD took a moment. He looked to the camera. Because someone has to prove that pain doesn't disqualify you. It prepares you. He pointed at the studio crew. That camera operator, her brother overdosed last year. The stage manager's father was laid off after 22 years at Ford. And that teacher in the front row? She lost her daughter in Uvalde. He wasn't giving a speech. He was telling a story America forgot to finish. We all carry something, JD whispered. What matters is what we do with it. In that moment, the Vice President of the United States didn't look like a politician. He looked like every broken, hopeful American still trying to heal. And in that, he became unshakable. The final question was directed at Robert De Niro. Mr. De Niro, would you like to respond? The actor took a deep breath. For the first time that night, he didn't raise his voice, didn't throw a punchline. He looked at JD. You know, I came here to embarrass you, he said, voice raw. I didn't think you were real. A hush fell. But I watched you speak. I saw your hands shake holding that letter. I heard your voice crack when you talked about your mother. His next words stunned the room. And it reminded me of me, before the fame. When I used to sleep on my aunt's couch in Little Italy, when my father stopped talking to me, when I thought I'd never be enough. A single tear fell down De Niro's face. He wiped it quickly. I still don't agree with your politics, he said, voice trembling. But you're not the worst vice president. He looked down. You might be the most honest. JD didn't smile. He just nodded. And across the nation, millions wept. Not from politics, but from the rarest thing seen on live TV. Truth. Just before the cameras were set to cut, a quiet man in uniform stood at the very back of the studio. He wasn't on the guest list. He wasn't mic'd up. But JD Vance saw him. The vice president gestured subtly to the producers. Let him speak. They hesitated. JD's voice firmed. He served. He's earned it. The man stepped forward. His name was Sergeant Luis Romero, U.S. Army, retired. He walked with a limp, a reminder from Kandahar. "Sir," he began, looking at JD, "I didn't vote for you. Not in 2024, I didn't even believe in you. But I watched what you did for my unit when the VA denied our claims. You didn't tweet. You showed up." The studio froze. "My daughter had cancer. We couldn't afford treatment. The paperwork was a mess. You made 2 calls. We got everything we needed." His voice cracked. "I owe you my little girl's life." De Niro stared down at the floor. Sergeant Romero stepped back into the shadows. JD Vance didn't respond with pride. He bowed his head, not in victory, but in reverence, for a story that wasn't his to tell, but that he had helped rewrite. At exactly 9:58 p.m., the studio lights flickered. A minor blackout. Everything went dark for 12 seconds. No cameras, no stage, just silence, and then whispers. Someone in the front whispered, "Maybe it's over." But a voice rang out, steady and sure. "It's not over. We don't go dark. Not now." It was JD. In the shadows, without lights or mics, he kept speaking, not to the audience, but to the people in the room. "Some of you are tired. Some of you feel unheard. You've lost your jobs, your trust, your hope. I know. I've lived it." A producer flicked a backup spotlight on. JD stood in it alone. Everyone else remained dim. "I don't need cameras to care. I don't need applause to lead. When the lights go out, that's when you find out who's real." A single tear rolled down a woman's cheek. She was undocumented. She worked night shifts, cleaning hospital floors. And JD had helped her son get emergency surgery when Medicaid failed. She'd never met him, until now. In the half-light, she clutched her heart. The lights came back, but something brighter had already turned on inside the room. When the final segment resumed, the moderator whispered, "We have one last minute, just enough time for closing words." Robert De Niro cleared his throat, but he didn't look at the camera. He looked at JD. "I came here with anger. That's what I know. That's what this country taught me." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once held Oscars and newborns. "But watching you tonight, I saw something I forgot was possible." The studio stilled. JD remained silent. "I still don't agree with everything you stand for, but I misjudged you, and I'm sorry." Gasps. Not because of what was said, but because of what it took to say it. "You reminded me that pain isn't weakness, and maybe we need less yelling and more listening." JD simply nodded. And in that moment, 2 men from 2 broken Americas reached something neither had expected: understanding. The moderator turned to the camera. "We were supposed to debate tonight. Instead, we witnessed healing." People didn't just watch, they wept. They whispered to each other, "Maybe there's still hope." And across the country, hearts cracked open, wide enough for truth to walk in. As the broadcast wrapped, producers started ushering people out, but a small voice from the front row stopped everything. "Mr. Vance, can I hug you?" A boy stood, no older than 10. Skinny arms, sunken cheeks. He wore a worn-out hoodie 3 sizes too big. His name was Miles. He had come with his grandmother, who'd driven 7 hours from Kentucky just to attend. The room froze. JD Vance slowly stepped forward, eyes wide. "What's your name, buddy?" "Miles. My daddy died last year," he said, trembling. "He was a coal miner. Mama says you tried to keep the mine open. You wrote him once." JD crouched to eye level. "I remember your dad." The boy reached out and hugged JD, clinging tightly, burying his face in his coat. JD hugged back firmly, without shame. "You're not alone," he whispered. "You hear me? You are not alone." Cameras zoomed in. No one told them to. De Niro turned away, hands over his mouth, overcome. And just like that, the night of the takedown became something else entirely. Not about who won the room, but about who held the hurting child when no one else did. The event ended. Lights dimmed. But the room didn't empty. People lingered. Not for autographs, not for selfies. They lingered because they had seen something rare. A janitor swept near the back wall, humming a lullaby. JD paused beside him. That song. My mama used to sing it. The old man looked up. She was right, too. It's a song for the broken-hearted. We don't get lullabies anymore, do we, sir? JD smiled sadly. No, we get headlines. They shared a quiet laugh, then silence. Suddenly, the janitor pulled out a crumpled cloth from his cart, an old American flag, faded and torn. It used to hang in my father's shop, got taken down in '08, said it wasn't modern enough. He handed it to JD. Maybe someone like you should carry it now. JD unfolded the cloth, pressing it to his chest. I will. I promise. No audience. No applause. Just a flag passed from hand to hand, from those who built America to one man still trying to hold it together. Not perfect, not polished, but real. The CNN broadcast became the most replayed clip in 2027, but the part that wasn't aired? It happened 2 minutes after the cameras stopped. De Niro, now standing quietly near the exit, walked over to JD. He extended a hand. You're not who I thought you were. JD didn't shake it. Instead, he hugged him, not out of victory, but out of forgiveness. We all carry something, JD said quietly. Even legends. De Niro wept, not movie tears, not Hollywood tears, real ones. People watched, not in judgment, but in reverence, as two men, once divided, stood side by side, broken but brave enough to face each other. Later that night, JD returned to his hotel. He didn't check the trending hashtags. He just knelt by his bed, took the letter from his pocket, and added a line. Papa, tonight, I saw something I didn't think I'd ever see. Healing. If this story made you cry, you're not alone. Share what moment hit you the hardest in the comments. We're reading every single one. Like this video if you believe America still has hope. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that remind us why we feel, why we fight, and why we still believe. We don't tell stories to go viral. We tell them to heal. See you in the next one.